Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. In this mock career counseling session, the chair of a psychology department is trying to change its emphasis from applied psychology to basic research. The chair begins by saying, psychotherapy's results aren't all we wish for, yet over the past 100 years, therapeutic modalities haven't improved enough. So rather than pass on those insufficient approaches, we have an obligation to our students, to our patients, and to society to focus on research, basic research, especially neuroscience research, to understand the full range of foundational causes of normalcy, supernormalcy, and mental illness, from mild anxiety to major depression, autism to Alzheimer's. But entrenched interests will fight it to the death, or at least until I'm fired. The counselor then said, who are the entrenched interests? The chair says professors who teach traditional psychology courses, alumni who are donators, big donors who don't want to think that their education is obsolete, students who want to be practitioners, not researchers, let alone basic science researchers, the community that likes getting free psychotherapy from our interns, the government, which wants to see that for all that money, all our graduates, or most of our graduates, get jobs. Everyone is fighting me except the few long-range thinkers who recognize that the field's got to change lest it join phrenology and alchemy in the dustbin of pseudoscience. The counselor then says, what's a point of entry into the problem, that is, the person or idea of least resistance? The chair says, I guess the provost and the professor who's currently teaching a course in neuropsych. The counselor then says, have you met with them to brainstorm a strategy? The chair says, only in bits and pieces. I should convene a formal meeting. The counselor says, do you have an intuition as to whether you should start the transition not by replacing any existing faculty, but by trying to bring in a heavy hitter in neuropsych who's got big grant money? The chair says, that would cost a fortune, atop a fat salary. He or she would demand a well-equipped lab. I would need to get top administration behind that. For starters, it might be more feasible to convince some existing faculty to teach neuroscience. The counselor says, sometimes ineffable status matters. Is it beyond the pale to create a Center for the Study of the Biological Basis of Psychology? Name it and they shall come? The chair says, it's a thought. Maybe it could initially be led by one of our professors and staffed by postdocs and graduate students. The counselor says, by any chance might an influential member of your faculty, who's a likely source of resistance, be named its head, the head of that center, and give that person a sabbatical to get up to speed? Chair says, I don't know enough about neuropsych to know whether he or she could learn enough in a 6-month or even year-long sabbatical to be a worthy head of the center. The counselor says, so are we back to trying to sell upper administration on bringing in someone with a huge grant and reputation in neuroscience? The chair says, that's worth discussing with the provost, but I worry that even if that's approved, so many of our faculty are steeped in tradition that they would fight changing the required courses, the specializations for the PhD, and so forth. That change would render less than useful all their years as experts in psychoanalysis and psychodynamics in favor of something they know little about. The counselor says, yes, it would be very tough to bring them around. Might one or two of the professors most likely to be obstructionist be encouraged to take early retirement or counseled to transfer to a university where their expertise would be more valued? Chair says, it's very iffy, but maybe a necessary try. The counselor said, you mentioned that the students are another source of resistance. The chair said, yep. They are spending all that time and money on a psych degree in hopes of being a therapist or some such. To avoid an uproar, I would need to make the transition slowly, maybe over a 5-year period. The counselor said, that would also help mollify the alumni? The chair says, yeah. For that, I think we would also need to meet one-on-one with the Fat Cat donors, have the alumni magazine focus on alumni accomplishments in psychotherapy, and then slowly transition into articles on our exciting neuroscience program and its terrific professors and students. Counselor then says, you also mentioned government pressure to increase your graduates' employability. Chair says, right, we probably need to beef up our contributions to the campus's career center, hold a series of events in which successful therapists come in to talk with the students, and maybe offer a course in transitioning from college to psychology career. The counselor then says, will the community object too vociferously to ending the free psychotherapy provided by your interns? The chair said we would need to shrink the program slowly, and when wait times to see an intern got too long, have referral sources. The counselor says, okay, well, we've at least touched on all the areas you mentioned. To summarize, what do you want to put on your to-do list? The chair says, I should do some hard thinking about each of those issues. Getting a star to head a center, gaining buy-in from faculty and administration, and somehow neutralizing the most fervent opponents, affecting a fair transition for students, and bringing alumni and government along. Then, set up a meeting with a swing vote and a supportive faculty member and at least one senior administrator to develop a plan that we can all get behind. The counselor says, at the risk of sounding like a shrink, how are you feeling about it, really? The chair says, nervous, but willing to take a few low-risk baby steps. Well, here are some counseling principles that were embedded in this session. To preempt or address client overwhelm, ask the client to identify a relatively easy first step. In this case, the counselor asked, what's a point of entry into the problem? The person or idea of least resistance. Another principle, it's helpful to structure the session. In this case, the structure was the resistance's loci, its locations, the places of its resistance, of the resistance. Especially when dealing with an efficacious client, like this chair of a department, get as many of the ideas to come from him or her as possible. When offering a suggestion, it's often wise to make it a choice. For example, do you have an intuition as to whether you should start the transition by not replacing an existing faculty member, but by trying to bring in a heavy hitter in neuropsych? Near the end of the session, or whenever a draft plan's been created, it's wise to do an emotional check-in. In this case, the counselor asked, at the risk of sounding like a shrink, how are you feeling about it really? And end the session with a summary, ideally said by the client, and which includes a to-do list. And finally, here are embedded principles that might be of value to leaders and other change agents. Consider the long view, the megatrends affecting your organization's products or services. Early on, identify major likely sources of support and of resistance, and develop an individualized plan for working with each. Decide whether it's wise to make a precipitous or a gradual change. In this case, it seems clear that an incremental approach is appropriate, but that won't always be the case. Develop what I call a shoestring competitor to the ideal. In this case, it was to, rather than recruit a heavy hitter that's expensive, start by reassigning an influential and potentially obstructionist existing faculty member to head the initiative. As they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. The other part of the shoestring competitor is to staff the center as much as possible with low-cost postdocs and graduate students. And finally, recognize the power of status. In this case, even if the initiative were modest, many people would like to be associated with something that sounds prestigious, the Center for the Study of the Biological Basis of Psychology. So, is there an idea, or more than one idea, in this article that you would like to incorporate into your work? In any event, I thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko. Feel free to give this a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Share, hit the share button, share it in your social media, write a comment, subscribe to this channel. But in any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.